I've always found it very interesting the lengths that people will go to have that momentary little rush. Yes, the power of the human orgasm really does seem to have brought us a whole host of technologies, especially when it comes to technological development and advancement around the sex industry and pornography in general. Pornography was pretty much instrumental in several parts of the internet coming about in modern times. For example, things like online credit and debit card transactions, something very much pioneered by the pornography industry. The ability to register a domain name as a piece of property so that you could definitely own it. Again, something pioneered somewhat by the pornography industry. And there's even some people who are suggesting that some of the format wars, things like VHS versus Betamax and Blu-ray versus HD, was also influenced to some degree by the adult entertainment industry. And that's why I find little developments like these Wi-Fi enabled vibrators to be quite interesting, because a lot of the adult entertainment industry tends to in some ways be very ahead of the curve in a lot of pieces of technology. And that's what sort of made me think that these little bits of tech had some very interesting little things to think about, and about their future application, or more correctly, about just wireless application for devices in the future. Obviously, for now, this is just basically a wirelessly remote-operated vibrator. That's all it is. That's its only function. But the idea that you could access something like that that is supposed to go inside a person via the internet, even through a paired device, so there is some limited security there, raises interesting ideas for other internalized wireless devices in the future. And that's why I was very concerned about people's ability to hack into them and what exactly we should classify it as. Should it be a crime? Is it? For example, if someone's using one of these sex toys and someone does hack into it and mess around with the settings and makes it go crazy while someone's wearing it, is anyone really going to notice, though? Are they going to just sort of go, oh, maybe it's just broken, they just throw it away and buy another one? Maybe no harm, no foul. Knowing whether or not someone has hacked into it intentionally or maliciously could be very difficult like that. But if you took this idea further, for bits of tech which are supposed to sit inside someone and to be accessed wirelessly so as to avoid further surgeries in the future. So let's think about this a little bit more in depth and from a slightly more medical perspective, just for funsies. Let's imagine, if you will, someone having an internal pacemaker, and we made those wirelessly accessible. Now, obviously not like open source, unsecure craziness, that would be ridiculous. Even just something that it had to be paired with, say, one specific console, and it could only be done with that. Although I'm sure inevitably someone would find a way to hack things, because they always do. Everything is hackable, especially if it's flying through the air. If there's data flying through the air some way that you can do that, someone will find a way of getting to it. But let's say, hypothetically, you could have, like, a wireless pacemaker. Now, that would have a whole load of advantages. You'd only have to have one surgery to put it in. Now, if it begins going on the fritz, you could go to a hospital and you could say, Doc, I think my pacemaker's having a few issues, can you have a look? And instead of having to book a surgery for you, cut you open, have a look, and see what's going on there, if they could just, say, wirelessly diagnose it, that would be not only a massive time saver, because you're not having to have a surgery, it would be freeing up an actual surgery room, it would be freeing up all the surgical staff, nurses, post-care, and so on and so forth. And you could get an answer more or less immediately. If you walk into a hospital, you say, oh, it might be going a little bit wrong, doctor just whips out their iPad, hooks up to your pacemaker internally via the Wi-Fi and goes, no, it's absolutely fine. Or, even better, if there's a change in your condition, instead of having to have your pacemaker, say, cut out and recalibrated or replaced with something else, they might be able to alter its parameters wirelessly. Now again, that has the same advantage. You're not having to go into surgery, you're freeing up all of that time, space, staff, saving money. And that's part of the reason why I find the idea of like these hackable sex toys to be very interesting, and it's why I posed these questions like, what would you count it as if someone hacked something like that? Because in the future, if you were to go down the route of, say, wirelessly accessible pacemakers to make it easier to access and diagnose problems with them, what would it be? What would it suddenly be if someone were to hack into one of them and set your pacemaker to hummingbird mode or something crazy? Your heartbeat suddenly going, 2,000 beats a minute, and you keel over and die. Well, obviously that would be murder, but you'd be looking at, like cyber murder. What happens if you went into it and you just messed around with the settings, put it really low, put it really high, low, high, low, high? You'd cause someone a great degree of discomfort. You might not kill them with it if you just put it within safe boundaries for normal people. You might not kill someone with it, but you'd cause them a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain. What would that be classed as? Would that be cyber assault? You could actually start making cases for things like that happening. And that's why when it came to the wireless dildos, I was posing the question, could you actually make a reasonable case for something like cyber sexual assault if someone hacked into this wirelessly and used it without your permission while you were wearing one? Because that's the ethical line which I'm questioning here, because this is the ethical boundary that's being opened up now. Now, I know we like to, as I've said in the last video about this, mock people who talk about the idea of cyber violence and all that stuff, because it can't be done yet. Someone just leaving you a mean message on the Twitters, that's not violence. It might be unpleasant for you, you might not like it, but it's not a form of violence towards you. It's just something, it's unpleasant, that's just part of life. There's always going to be stuff in life you don't like. There's always going to be people who are dicks. But when you start entering this idea of wireless internal apparatus for people, you do start getting this bizarre world view where it's like, if you have an internal device that is in some way regulating part of your bodily functions, and someone hacks into that and changes its priorities or changes its settings in some way, that then becomes a very serious deal. And this is why I found this vibrating dildo thing, this wireless vibrator, to be really interesting, because this is the ahead of the curve question. This is, again, the sex industry or the porn industry being one step ahead of where everything else is going to follow. It's pioneering this idea of something going inside a person that's wirelessly accessible, and thus this is the point where these questions start coming out and actually have to be very seriously considered for the future. Of course, moving on to slightly more lighter-hearted ways of looking at it, the idea of, say, internet-usable sex toys for people opens up a whole other load of career possibilities. I mean, say, consider things like professional cam girls, women who go onto the internet and usually they'll, take phone calls or have instant message conversations with people, and as far as I'm aware, you can, pay them with not necessarily actual currency, or you can buy, website currency to exchange, and in some cases they may, do something for you. It's basically sort of an online equivalent of a lap dance, effectively. Devices like this, if you could say, put it into that particular industry, you've now got a whole new component. So put this into that. So you could have someone on a website actually interacting with these girls on a new level. So say you could pay a certain amount of this online currency, get them to send you a code, and you can then control this device that they are using. You could control levels of intensity and whatnot. So it would give you that level of interaction with someone through the internet. So there's a potential business venture there. Now imagine if you combined that with, say, a virtual reality style tech. Wow, you've opened up a whole new floodgate of interactive online technology there, which simply, again, requires someone just handing out a code, and then you can do this stuff with someone else. So this is, again, why I find this sort of really interesting. You've got, that sort of medical, ethical potential in the future, because, as I said, the adult industry tends to be a little bit ahead of the curve on some of these things. But it's also opening up a whole new avenue within that industry as well. And unfortunately, as with so many other things, by the nature or virtue, I suppose, of the sex industry always trying to find new ways of parting people with their money, they inevitably get saddled with all of the weird and new ethical questions and implications that technology brings. So I suppose it's just one of those things. Keep an eye on it, see how it develops, see if any of these problems arise, and if they do, what exactly is the outcome from them, because I guarantee you that anything that does happen with someone hacking into one of these wireless sex toys could quite easily become a precedent-setting case if something like that does happen for the future. And it could quite easily then end up being referenced or be something that people consider when they start looking at tech such as wireless pacemakers.